Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Angus Integration Joint Board. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all public committee reports, including details of specific recommendations, are available on the Council's website. I would like to remind members that it is currently the pre-election period in light of the forthcoming UK Parliamentary General Election on the 4th of July 2024. With reference to Angus Council's pre-election guidance, Section 4 of the guidance covers publicity, which includes Angus Integration Joint Board meetings, and I would ask members to be mindful of the legal requirements in their discussion and debate during this meeting. Thank you very much. And moving on to the agenda, item 1 is apologies, and Fiona will give us those. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, there's apologies from Councillor George Meehan. Today we'll have Councillor Lois Speed on remotely, Chris Boyle's remote. Karen Fletcher is here for Susie Flower, the Nurse Director, and we've got Nikki Worrell, who's also joined us remotely. The rest of the members are in the chamber.
Lovely, thank you very much, and welcome to the substitutes. Item 2 is declarations of interest and statements of transparency. Does anyone have anything on that item? Seeing lots of shakes of heads in the room and on screen, so that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 3, which is the minutes, and 3A is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to take it as read that you have read the papers. Are there any issues of accuracy that you want to bring up, or is everyone happy with the minutes? Okay, can we then agree the minutes, please? Yep, thank you very much. And moving on to 3B on page 11, that's the action log, and I'll hand over to Jill.
Thank you, Chair. So the action log is looking quite green, which is helpful, and it just demonstrates the progress that individuals are making in relation to the action points. For those that we have agreed further dates to come back, we have included them on the action log for this meeting, but we will have an updated work plan at each meeting, and we'll capture the future reports to come back as part of the work plan. We've got one red item on page 12, which was overdue. I'm pleased to say that has now moved to green. All financial recovery plans have now been considered by the executive management team, and will have ongoing scrutiny over those reports. The item around the finance report, in particular around pharmacy and prescribing, that continues to be work in progress, and we will provide an update at the next IJB.
Thank you, Jill. Does anyone have any questions for Jill on the action log? Nope, that's great. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Jill, and it's great to see things move into the green category on that. Thank you. So item 3C is the Chair's assurance report from the Strategic Planning Group, and that is Jill again. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is our assurance report from the meeting at the start of June. Again, I'll go on the assumption that individuals have read the report. The Chair's assurance report details the decisions that were taken by the Strategic Planning Group, but I am going to hand over to Sandy, who chaired that meeting in my absence, just if there is anything specific from the meeting that he wants to raise.
Yeah, hi Jill. I don't honestly think there's anything particular we need to raise. There's a number of things that did come up during that meeting that are then subsequently reflected in the strategic planning update paper, particularly regarding the structure of the strategic commissioning plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sandy. Anyone have any questions on this paper? Oh, okay, we'll just note it, and thanks for sharing that. I certainly find them helpful to read. Okay, so I'm moving on to the Chair's Assurance Report from Clinical Care and Professional Governance, and I'll hand over to Dr Alison Clement. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. You see here that we have the annual assurance report from our Clinical Care Professional Governance meeting. We continue to have good engagement across all of our services and a regular reporting template which is used, and you can see in the appendix there that we have all our service reporting in on a regular basis. We also cover risk, adverse events, and newly we've got a bit of work around resilience within the Health and Social Care Partnership, which reports in, and that is going well. You can see our main risks are around commission service provider failure, resilience planning, and the sustainability of primary care services is an important risk for us, and there is currently a Tayside-wide sustainability of primary care services risk, which is now likely to move to being looked at within Angus. Prescribing, the ECLIPSE system, workforce optimisation are all there as well, along with finance. You can see there the lunch and learn sessions that we're using to hopefully give the IGB a greater understanding of how we're managing our risks. The adverse events there are described, in particular the top 5 most reported categories, which are remaining similar. For our medication adverse events, pressure ulcers and falls, we request regular reporting on a 6-monthly basis, and that's giving us greater understanding of the issues and also enabling us to support quality improvement. And I'm pleased to say that there has been quite considerable improvements across particularly pressure ulcers in terms of ensuring reporting and improvements are made, and also the falls programme in Angus, which is going very well. It's worth also noting that the current governance structures for NHS Tayside are under review, and this may result in a change in reporting requirements moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. And I've attended the Lunch and Learn events. It would be great to see a few more people attend those. They're really helpful, and I'm very mindful that I think at the last one I was the only voting member at it, but I think everyone gets something out of it, and I think we'll probably review, how that goes in future, because it is quite a big resource to have these put on. I've certainly found them really helpful, but I would love that to be more widespread. Does anyone have any questions for Alison on that paper? Yes, David.
Just for my clarification, there's a reference on page 23 to low-level services. I just wonder if it's possible to expand to explain what actually envisaged or is already in place for that. Thank you.
A reference to, sorry, I didn't quite pick that up.
In the middle of page 23 is a reference to the controls that are in place to manage risk and the category low-level services.
So my understanding is that is for people with a lower level of need, so people that don't require regular carer input but maybe have some needs that might be met in a way that isn't requiring more substantial, such as 4 times a day carers visiting to support them. It's people who have a lesser need for intense input to maintain their independence.
John, do you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would agree with what Alison has said. It does link to the national eligibility criteria levels, so we have low, moderate, substantial and critical as the 4 levels. So as Alison said, those with lower level needs wouldn't be in receipt of statutory services or particularly care at home services. So it could be a lunch club, it could be something provided through the third sector. So generally speaking, those lower level needs.
Thank you very much. Is that okay, David? Are you happy with that?
I think it would be helpful to have a bit more substantive information around what that comprises. I mean, I understand hierarchically where this fits but it's the substance of what's going to be available to those who do not meet thresholds that the question was aimed at. Thank you.
Okay, so sessions be helpful for that. So just get that wee plug in there. So thank you. As I'm trying not to mention the slips, trips and falls, but given my activities this week, but I always find this report incredibly helpful and very reassuring in terms of how things are being monitored and the governance structure around that. So Alison, thank you very much. Any questions anywhere else? I'm not seeing anything online either. So thank you very much. We've just been asked to note this report for information. Thank you very much. And moving on to the Chair's assurance report for the Audit Committee. I think, Sandy, are you bringing this in, or Andrew, do you want to introduce it?
I'll say a couple of words and then pass over to Sandy. Chair, thank you. This is the report of the meeting held on the 24th of April. And it's just standard items against the work plan, and it's all, the minutes are detailed in Appendix 1. I'd like to highlight two particular things. One is to recognise in particular the considerable progress that's being made in addressing the internal audit recommendations with the charging for services following a full audit. So there's been a lot of hard work done there and a lot of progress made. So I'd like that recorded. And also bring to the notice of the IJB that Nikki Worrell and Kirsty Lee attended their first audit meeting on the Audit Committee meeting on the 24th, and again this morning. Very glad to have them on board, but I would like to point out that we're still one short and we're still looking for one more member, so if anybody fancies a Audit Committee, would be very welcoming. Thank you. I'll pass over to Sandy now.
Right. Okay, thanks, Andrew. And we will bring that point that Andrew has planted in everybody's minds back to the IJB in August. Hopefully, by that point, somebody will feel suitably encouraged to volunteer to take part in the Audit Committee. And there's lots of us around the table who would be happy to speak to anybody who may be thinking about joining the Audit Committee about what it's like and what we do. And I certainly am happy to chat to people. I've only got a couple of comments to add to this, Chair. And it's not so much about what we've seen in this report, because this covers our April meeting, but just to note that at today's Audit Committee meeting, the Audit Committee received our internal auditor's annual report, and that was generally reasonably okay. But one or two things for us to follow up on, which we'll do through the management team. And we also considered the IGB's unaudited accounts, and again, they have been conferred, subject to one or two slight adjustments and updates for submission to our external auditors by the end of this month. Thanks, Chair.
Great work, thank you very much. And yes, I had specifically noted Nikki and Kirsty's attendance this morning, so and that's great. And I think once we've maybe got new non-execs from NHS Tayside, that we can have a more holistic conversation around who's on that. Any questions for Andrew or Sandy? No. Well, we can we accept the Chair's assurance report, please, and also note the minutes that are attached there. We can do that in one go. Thank you very much. And we're now moving on to the Chief Officer update. And Jill, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the Chief Officer update this month covers quite a few different areas, some of which we have had some information at the April IJB. So certainly the safer staffing is a progress update since April, along with an update on the day opportunities engagement, and obviously a further paper around that is due to come back in the next couple of months. The report itself details our current position around delayed discharges at the time where the reports were due in. I am pleased to say that as of 10:29 this morning, Sally was very precise with the timing, we had 15 delays across the system for Angus. So that again just demonstrates a lot of the hard work and progress that's being made to support those transitions of care. The other thing just to highlight is in relation to the NHS Tayside delivery plan and strategy, just to, I guess, acknowledge the NHS reform that was launched a couple of weeks ago following debate in Parliament, and the session that was held yesterday around the system leadership event around the strategy itself. That focused a lot on prevention, was certainly an area of a lot of discussion yesterday, and that's something that we will continue to support across the system, but also consider how Angus IJB could be a bit more plugged into that, linking in with our community planning partnership colleagues as well. Just to bring attention to probably the last 4 items on the Chief Officer update. Very successful stories, I am pleased to say. We had the Are You OK launch, which was well attended. A couple of injuries, but well attended. We've had a really successful volunteer week, and we have had nurses recognised through the work around the sexual assault response coordination service at Buckingham Palace, and 2 Angus nurses who received RCN Scotland Nurse of the Year awards this year as well. So some really positive feedback there.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Jill. On just one question on page 35 of the combined papers, section 3.4, third paragraph, middle of it, it says, care home providers have shared frustration at the current setup with the partnership. What specifically was that, and what's been done to address those frustrations? I know you list it further on, but it seems a bit of a... Is it an open-ended thing, or have we closed that loop?
So I'm going to just, and Nikki as well, or John might want to comment on that as well, Andrew, if that's okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for your question. I think it was really around just our processes and how we engage with our care homes, and looking at how we manage that, and just because there's multiple people involved, across the different offices, it was just about just trying to see how we can manage that in a better way. Just due to pressures, reviews have had to be cancelled, etc. Just really what is said there. So we are aware of it, and we are engaging and looking at our process and how we can address that. Thank you.
Thanks, Eunice. Nikki, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's obviously a lot going on in care homes at the moment, and and certainly a lot of increased scrutiny. And I think that can cause, whilst that's right, and there have obviously been some concerns and things going, but there's an awful lot going on. And Jill mentioned the implementation of the safe staffing, and with no funding attached to that. So I just think it's a whole pot of things. People, are struggling with funding. I think financial sustainability is a concern for many providers. So, and things like, people that are coming into care homes, needs are increasing, and sometimes that's not recognised in terms of funding again. So, in addition to what Eunice has said, I think it's just a whole raft of things, to be fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Does anyone? David, again.
Thank you. Under 3.2, the opportunities section, the priority areas does not include any reference to care or respite. And given that the last report we heard, which was the progress report on engagement, the 2 broad areas that were featuring heavily were social isolation, which is referenced, and care or respite, which isn't, and I wonder if that could be included, because I would ask that.
Eunice?
Thank you, David, for your comments. So certainly we can consider that and look further at our engagement feedback. And I think improving flexibility is about, the suggestion would be that is around carer respite and individual support for people and when they want to have the day opportunities, but we can certainly look further at the wording of carer respite and can consider that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to mention briefly the consumer legislation, the consumer duty update. I think that's quite an interesting change in language around the people we deliver services to, and I think that might take a bit of getting used to for us all, but please read that section, and if you need any more, please check out the legislation on the website, the government's website. But are you I think Eunice is wanting to come in on that.
Sorry, I'm just thinking further about that. I mean, we're going to be doing an extensive engagement, so obviously as we get the feedback from the public, things may change. That'll be one comment we can add in, but I think we'll see what the engagement is as well, because these priorities might change depending on feedback, so that will also be considered. So it's just to add that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, people might not see themselves as consumers of a public service, so yeah, that will be an interesting one to watch. Thank you very much. No more questions there? I'm not seeing anything online, so if you can just note the contents of Jill's report, please, that would be great. And moving on to the finance report, and Sandy, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just kind of highlight one or two things and then happy to take any questions. This is our end-of-year report. Ties in with the fact I was mentioning earlier on. Today we submitted our unaudited annual accounts to our external auditors describing the year-end position. Section 4.3 of the report just sets out where we were at the year-end, which is an underspend of about £4 million. Not that far away from what we had previously projected, where we were thinking that the underspend might be about £3.8 million. There's always at the year end a bit of movement as final balances come in, and that's what we've seen this year. The themes that we have described in this report are largely the same as what we have set out throughout most of the year, and I'll mention that a wee bit later on. A couple of other wee things I just want to flag up. Section 5.11 or 511 on page 46, section there about the IGB strategic financial plan. I had actually been hoping to bring back a bit of an interim update on where we were with the ask of the IGB at the last at the April meeting. But we are going to bring proposals back to the August 2024 meeting, and we are working as best we can in the executive management team circles, through the strategic planning group, strategic delivery group, to develop responses to the ask of the IGB. And as I say, I anticipate that will come back in August. A couple of other things. Section 7.2, again, just reiterates the themes that have been prevalent throughout this year as to why we have been underspending, vacancies in our staffing complements, the unmet need issues that have been mentioned earlier on, one or two other factors in there, very similar to what we've seen earlier on in the year. And the underspends that we have seen at the end of this year will, as has happened in previous years, then migrate into the IGB's reserves. The IGB's reserves for this year, as we close the year, are set out in Appendix 2. Again, most of that information is familiar to board members, but we will include the balance of underspends from last year in here, and they are actually referred to in Appendix 2. It's probably worth me noting that the financial challenges of IGBs across Scotland are pretty common and pretty significant, and they are escalating. That's a common theme. And where IGBs have seen underspends in previous years, many are moving to a break-even position. Where they've been breaking even, they're moving to overspend positions. And because of that general trajectory of deteriorating financial positions, IGBs are generally starting to consume or planning to consume their reserves. And we will gradually see reserves come down in all IJBs across Scotland. And that's what we will expect to see in our IJB as well. Our IJB reserves are still relatively high or strong compared with other IJBs, but we haven't yet, as an IJB, moved into a position where we're overspending yet, which is a position that others are moving towards. Chair, the last section I'd like to mention is Appendix 4, which is a wee bit different to content we normally have here. It's reflective of discussions from 14 months ago at the IJB in April 2023, where we were kind of summarising our collective thoughts on the way ahead in terms of our ways of working and committee structures. And there was a series of refinements that are set out in the table in the middle of Appendix 4 that we collectively agreed 14 months ago. And there's a current status in terms of where we've got to. And most of these things are fallen into place or become kind of almost default businesses in terms of things like assurance reports coming through. So I think, as we've gone through the consultation around putting this report together, our kind of collective view is that we've largely delivered and put in place the things that we aspired to last year from April 23, and we now have I suppose, a new settled position in terms of how these things come together. But as it says at the bottom of that page, Chair, if people feel they need to be reviewed further, we can always do that. If there's things are changing around us or internally, we can always respond to that. So I think we were just we felt we could close that out, but the door to major or minor tweaks or revisions is always there for us to open and have a look at. Thanks, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sandy. That makes sense. Peter.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Sandy, as always, for the paper and the explanation around it. Some really good work going on under really challenging circumstances. I think the establishment of reserves and the creation of new funds, such as the Workforce Health Reserve, demonstrate really proactive financial planning. So thanks and well done for that. I suppose, as you mentioned, while the underspend is positive, it's obviously concerning that some key underspends are associated with unfilled posts. So although not really a financial question, I suppose I'm keen to just hear again what steps have been taken to try and address these recruitment challenges so that we can start meeting said unmet need. And I suppose a final question is around the lead partner services and how will the proposed financial recovery plan for the out-of-hours service be implemented to ensure sustainability but not compromise service quality? Thanks.
Thanks, Peter and Chair. I will respond to that first, but I'll pass on to perhaps a couple of others in terms of picking up various detail. So you're right. The position this year is affected by things like unmet needs and vacancies, and we have run at a high level of vacancies throughout the year, as is evident in the report. Purely from a financial planning position, we expect and we plan for those vacancies to be filled. We don't plan for them all to be filled from the 1st of April, the 1st of July this year, but we expect them to gradually be filled over the forthcoming period. But that's from a financial planning position, so we kind of hold the flexibility generally in our plans to fill vacancies as they are fillable. But I think it's probably best on that point I pass over to Eunice from a workforce perspective when we come back to the out-of-hours question in a second.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Peter. So a lot of work is done around recruitment and retention, and we have a designated subgroup of the Workforce Steering Group that focuses on this very area. So in terms of for social care, for example, we are running recruitment fairs. If you are on our Facebook page or Twitter, you'll see regular adverts for recruitment fairs and encourage people to come along. We are in the process of doing a number of videos around working in Angus Health and Social Care Partnership. So we've done one on social care that is being well promoted. We are doing one on district nursing and allied health professionals that will be coming out very soon. So we're being really proactive in terms of trying to address recruitment challenges. We're also promoting things like, what a great place it is to live and work in Angus. So trying to encourage people to come to the area to live. We're looking, as well as bringing people into the partnership, we're looking at our succession planning, our staff health and wellbeing, looking at rounded things that we can offer people if they come and work with us. So it's a really proactive area and we're working really hard. I think the reality is that nationally there are national recognise challenges around workforce. There are gaps in professions that we require. So as part of that, we look at international recruitment. We try and encourage people to come in. We're also trying to grow our own workforce, working really hard with schools, career fairs, employability services, 16 plus. So lots of ways we're trying to do to try and draw people in and train people and upskill people if they're in the workforce. So if anybody's got any other suggestions, always happy to hear, but it really is a strong focus of what we do. So hopefully that offers some reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the Kerry Fair was about 10 days ago on to it, but I did note it and I did share it, so thank you. Chris, online. Sorry, Chris, hold the fire. There's something about out of hours being picked up first. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. So just in relation to out of hours, as the report indicates, we have had a financial recovery plan from the service that we have under ongoing review, both in executive management team but also within the lead partner forum as well. The out of hours service, I think we highlighted when it first was reported in the finance report some of the challenges that it's had since COVID. They've been working tirelessly over the last probably 18 months to look at demand, capacity and different models, and they are due to have that written up following engagement. So we will hopefully be seeing a report in October around a proposed model for out of hours. It has to link in with the regional work and the work that's ongoing both in Nine Wells and PRI, just in terms of access to services. But there is a lot of work going on within that service to bring them back into financial balance, but actually we, as a area, we need to make sure that we have a financially viable model, but actually one that meets patient care and needs as well. Nationally, we're actually in a very good position with our out of hours service. We're quite lucky. I don't know, Chris, if you agree, but we're very lucky in Tayside around our out of hours service in relation to the workforce, both from a medical and a nursing perspective. In the service and many board areas are quite enviable of our position, but as you can see, that comes at a cost as well. So hopefully the work that they'll have done to describe a new model, we'll see that in October.
Thank you, Jill. You happy with that, Peter? Yeah. Chris, thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. A couple of points I'd want to raise. The first is around reserves. Sandy described ourselves and other IJBs who currently have significant reserves in place. IJBs with continuing funding crises are moving towards break even, and Sandy then referred to IJBs that ended up in overspend situations. Are we not heading headlong into we're already in a significant funding crisis for social care? Are we not heading head on into an even worse crisis that without significant intervention from the Scottish Government, that we're going to end up in a far, far worse situation than we are now? And reserves are there to be used for those rainy days, and I would expect them to be used to keep services going. But we are heading head on into a significant funding crisis, and we just describe it as we're okay now, we'll break even, and then there's going to be an overspend. That overspend will, if not addressed, will mean further drastic cuts to service provision to the most needy and vulnerable members of our communities. And I think that message needs to be clear and needs to be shared with the Scottish Government and indeed the London Government. The second point is around recruitment. I thanks Eunice for responding to Peter's points as well, hearing about lots of hard work going on and a lot of work being done in those areas. But I'm wondering, I think it might be helpful for the board, is that, each time we meet, we know that there's, quote, several service areas operate with unfilled vacancies linked to staff turnover and recruitment. And we hear that every couple of months when we meet. And I wonder whether, I certainly would think so myself, that it would be helpful for the board to hear each board on the update what initiatives have been carried out what has been done. We know the workforce plan refers to recruitment initiatives and exercises to endeavour to recruit more staff. But what's done every couple of months? What particular things have been in place? So we heard a couple of things about job fairs there. But perhaps more importantly than that, though, all those things are going on. And that's hearing about that, and that's very much qualitative. I think I'd be interested to know from a quantitative point of view, how successful were those initiatives in filling and unfilled vacancies and recruiting social care workers, social care officers into that burgeoning number of unfilled vacancies in the private and voluntary sector, and indeed within the local authority. Because we can, at the end of the day, we can do as many initiatives as we like, but if they're not actually bringing people across the threshold into the world of social care provision, then we might need to rethink it. So some tangible, measurable figures would certainly help, and a regular report, I think, on what work and what particular initiatives and events have taken place, and the success would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And particularly in relation to your first point, the whole NHS reform agenda that was announced a couple of weeks ago is directed to address the issues that you've raised. And we've already got the National Care Service in train, which it is a challenging process, no question about that, but it's an absolute recognition that those are issues that the Scottish Government is attempting to address. And I think the second point, the Chief Officer update is a route for some of those issues as well, but I just wonder if Jill would like to come in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, happy to include some information in the Chief Officer update on a every meeting basis. And if there's anything that we feel merits a fuller report, then we would be happy to bring that back. We are due to have the annual workforce update in October anyway, coming back. So if members are content, we can include an update for August in the Chief Officer's report, and with a view to the full report coming back in October.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. And Lois.
Yep, thank you. Excuse me. I share many of the concerns of Mr. Boyle. I'm aware recently that North Ayrshire have actually done a bit of a U-turn, and they're now bringing their care at home services back in-house. I just wondered what discussions have taken place between Angus and North Ayrshire, and I'd probably really like to see if this is something that we could look into to doing ourselves. I mean, I would imagine there must have been a lot of work gone in before that decision was taken in North Ayrshire.
Thank you, Lois.
I'm happy to then
and then pass it over.
Thank you, Lois. I think the work that was undertaken in North Ayrshire, I think there's a few areas that I've been keeping an eye on how that has progressed. I think it's still in its infancy in terms of the timing of that. It's certainly something that is on the agenda from a Chief Officer's perspective to get some feedback as to how that's actually working in reality, because I don't underestimate the challenge, given the conversation that we've had locally around recruitment and retention, the challenges that they will face in relation to recruiting to an in-house provision. But happy to do a bit further exploration into that. We do have our own internal smaller team at the moment. People will be aware of the ERT team. There is a review of that underway, and further information around that. Maybe I'll be back at the IJB in future months. And part of that review does include how much in-house provision is being provided, what is the actual need around that, and I'm sure Nikki may want to come in as well around it. I don't know if she's had any conversations with her counterpart in North Ayrshire, but there's quite a few eyes on this, Lois, in terms of how it's actually going to be working in reality. I don't know if Eunice or John want to come in prior to Nikki.
No, but I think Nikki was wanting to come in, so that would be helpful, Nikki.
Yeah, was aware about that, and there's been lots of discussions from a Scottish Care perspective around, the bringing of it. Care at home services. My understanding is it's not been particularly positive in I think just thinking of the whole Help to Live at Home project that took place a few years ago. And so I suppose, you know, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons was that it was so expensive to have care at home services in-house. So I suppose I'm, just a wee bit, and obviously I was very involved in the Help to Live at Home project from an internal point of view. So I suppose I'm thinking, you know, the financial implications of bringing care at home back, you know, internal, but, you know, equally appreciate all the issues and concerns that are around at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alison's wanting to come in as well now. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be important to consider the model of care and the interface between clinical services and care services. At the moment, we have gaps in the workforce across district nursing and across nursing in our care homes and in general practice, and I think that it's important that we make sure that whatever model we consider, that we're considering that we need to get something that's sustainable across all of the workforce, and don't lead to, in order to make efficiencies in one area that sorts the problem for that particular profession, it decompensates another, and that is about being smart. And a lot of the time it is about giving people local opportunities for career progression, and I wouldn't want to lose that, whatever model we decide.
Thank you very much, Alison. Any more questions at all on that paper? Okay, if we can look at the recommendations on page 42, I think we've done recommendation 1, which was scrutinise and note the overall financial position, and are we happy to note and accept the other recommendations as stated?
Sorry.
Yes. Sorry?
Sorry, no, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see a hand up.
Sorry, Chair, no, I was looking for the opportunity to just come back on the feedback, but I've maybe missed that boat or provide comment, but it's up to yourself, Chair.
If you are wanting to come back on that, I'm more than happy to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, it was really just to say, I mean, I would like to think, I would imagine that North Ayrshire must have had to do a good bit of homework and a good bit of research and consultation and really be able to kind of put their case forward quite strongly with this reverting back, given that they'd already done a similar, taken a similar course of action to Angus previously. And I guess what I would say around kind of the recruitment, I would also imagine it would be much easier for the local authority to recruit because they do tend to have better terms and conditions, which in turn does help to produce a more sustainable workforce. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill's going to come back in on that.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lois. There was extensive engagement done around that. What we can do is reach out to our colleagues in North Ayrshire and see if we can get access to some of that information. I think it does link to some of the other work that is ongoing within the partnership around the day opportunities as well, how people use their SDS. I think there was a Health and Sports Committee session just last week in relation to the monitoring and evaluation of SDS usage, and they referred to a report called My Choice, My Support, and that's something around it. I think there's a whole bit of work, Councillor Speed, not just around care at home provision, whether it's in-house or external. It's the wider support that's around all of that and how we can work with the population across Angus to get what is right for them. But happy to reach out to colleagues in North Ayrshire and see if we could get some of the information.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I'd really like that. Like I say, I think when I seen that news, I was kind of hoping that the first thing that Angus would be doing would be picking up that phone and having that conversation to find out just exactly what led them to this. And I certainly would look forward to further feedback in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we can then scoot back to the recommendations, are we happy to agree those? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And moving on to item 6, which is the strategic planning update, and I think Sandy's taking this time. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We've got hopefully a pretty substantial report here, but I'm going to assume that people have had the chance to read it in advance, and I'm just going to, I suppose, highlight two things, and one is at section 5.1 of this report, we are looking, as you can tell, for approval today from the IJB to just slightly reconfigure, restructure, if you like, our strategic commissioning plan. And this is after we've been through the strategic planning group and considered some changes and explained them and kind of collectively agreed that these would represent a better way forward for us. So that's set out in the report, and it obviously then captures itself in recommendation 2. And the other thing I really just want to say in terms of not going into the detail is we do have representatives around the table and also online in terms of Gail and Terry, who in particular would be able to answer any questions that crop up regarding mental health. So, Chair, I'm happy for us just to take questions and we will try and collectively respond to those. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sandy, and it's lovely to see Terry and Gail online as well. Any questions? Peter?
Thanks again, Sandy. Yeah, another good paper. So I think the proposed revisions of the strategic priorities seem well aligned. Minimise report duplication, which is always a good thing, and give us a more holistic view of the kind of health of the organisation. And I do note the narrative in the paper regards priority 4, but I suppose my question was, while the renaming and reorganisation of the priorities seems sense, how will we ensure that the removed priority 4 elements are effectively integrated into the other priorities without losing focus on equity of access and public protection and so on? Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Great question, and John's going to pick that up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Peter. So I think what's been highlighted in the paper is we feel that those are the core parts of business really within the partnership work. Adult support and protection exists across all spheres, and obviously the next report will kind of touch on that as well. In terms of equity of access, again, this is something that's been looked at through our service review, and future structures going to inform that equity of access. So again, that does exist across the board. As far as assurance to IGB goes, and again, we'll touch on this on report number 7, there will be obviously the opportunity for the work around adult protection to be reported back to the board, to the committee, to provide updates through the new structure. So we feel that those existing and future plans should provide the assurance required for IGB in respect of access and also the work around protecting people. Thank you.
Thank you. You okay, Peter? Okay. Chris, please.
Thanks. I just want to make particular reference to a part of the report. It's in Appendix 2. And it talks about working with Angus Alive to achieve the ambitions of the Active Scotland Outcome Framework. The timescale's complete and it's business as usual. Perhaps not business as usual at Angus Alive, because Angus Alive have just embarked, albeit it's taken a while to start, on a significant transformation review, which I understand is now called Project 2030. Angus Alive have a diminishing amount of money given to them by Angus Council every year to deliver the services on behalf of the authority. I was just therefore wondering, obviously, whether the board and those involved in the Living Life Well plan are aware of that review at Angus Alive, and that could potentially impact in the future on the leisure services and facilities that Angus Alive provide. Obviously, I can't dream of starting to second guess the outcome of a big review like that, but just to be aware that that is happening. And it would be worthwhile, I think, that the health and wellbeing lead from Angus Alive, who's part of your group, is fed any like worries or concerns around how that organisation might look in the future, and the services it currently provides, which meet those targets and aspirations in your plan, and how it might look in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I think we've got a few. Alison and then Gail wants to come in, and I am aware of that review, and I think the work that we've been doing in collaboration with the Health and Social Care Partnership really strengthens the case for exactly that kind of work. Alison.
Yes, I can confirm that through the Prevention and Proactive Care Steering Group, which is a partnership approach across Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, Angus Council and Angus Alive, we are looking at the redesign of services to support people who have more difficulty accessing leisure services in a traditional way, looking at supporting people through our programme to have exercise classes that are inclusive and tailored to them. So really building on looking at the access and equity of access and addressing inequalities. So that work is work in progress and should inform the type of skills that we need people to have in the future. And indeed, we've had some success through recruitment and new courses in Angus College in terms of developing the workforce that can meet that sort of activity rather than perhaps the more traditional activities. And I don't see any lack of demand for that. In fact, it's going well, and that will be continually evaluated and looking at the evidence base behind what works, and that would hopefully inform what we deliver in the future.
Thank you. And there was tremendous input from Angus Alive at the most recent Community Planning Partnership development sessions, which was incredibly well received and was absolutely spot on. I think it really nailed down exactly what they're doing. Jill, do you want to come in? Gail, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to come on and kind of echo what Alison has said, but also to kind of reassure in terms of the action that's within the Live and Life Well plan. The Mental Health and Wellbeing Lead from Angus Alive sits on the Angus Mental Health and Wellbeing Network, and we all sit on the Prevention and Proactive Care Group that Alison was just mentioning as well. So we're all linked in. As you said, Chris, no one knows what that review will bring out, but at the moment we are continuing to progress the work together, and as the Chair has just pointed out, there is real links togetherness in terms of Angus Alive and the partnership, and to push that work forward. So although we don't know the outcome of the review, definitely in terms of the leads and myself, we are all working together to ensure that that work continues in the meantime while the review is being undertaken. Thanks.
Spot on. Thank you very much, Gail. And Lois.
Yep. Thanks. Yeah, Angus Alive obviously are facing similar pressures to the partnership and the council, but I just wondered what conversations are going on in terms of kind of accessibility. Alison kind of mentioned accessibility and tackling inequalities, and I know that sometimes access to leisure centres, sometimes pool temperatures, equipment isn't always working or suitable for some of the kind of users with the most complex needs. So I just wondered what discussions are taking place and what kind of improvements are in store to be able to address these needs.
Thank you, Lois.
Thanks. I absolutely agree in terms of some of the challenges that you've described there. I'm just reflecting back to the development session that we had in September, I think it was, or maybe a bit later for Strategic Planning Group, and it was a really well attended but well informed day as well, and there was somebody from Angus Alive at that event, and there was a lot of discussion around how we could support access and what does access actually mean, because access can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So at that point he did commit to doing a bit of work and linking it in through the Prevention and Proactive Care group around access, and I guess that just reiterates the importance of what we were trying to say around priority 4 equity of access as part of everything that we do. Sally and Alison are both here, who both sit on that group, and if there's nothing that's progressed since then happy to go back and have that discussion again. But he did commit to looking at that, including pool temperatures, because he actually wasn't aware of the impact that could have on individuals' ability to use the facilities.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy with that, Lois?
Yeah, thank you. That's really good to hear. And if possible, it would be great if I could get an update on that bit of work. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that's something maybe the whole IGB would like to be copied into, so thank you. I just had a very small question around the autism and neurodevelopmental pathway work and which part of the council, which service is leading on that. And because it concerns me that, you know, we're getting a lot of adult diagnoses, so just to match up that. So maybe Kirsty, thanks.
Less of an answer and more of a supplementary question. So I just know there on page 67 the significant number of referrals, so 15 referrals in one area per month coming in, and then further up on page 59 the 2-year kind of waiting list. And I suppose, so less of an answer for you and more of a question about where that work is sitting at the moment. I see some reference to additional peer support workers, but just a wee bit more information on that. And you're right, in terms of transition work, it's a really important crossover, isn't it, from young people coming from children's services into adults. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Terry's going to take that.
Hi, yeah, I suppose we had a meeting of our Angus Mental Health and Wellbeing Network today. I'm the chair of that meeting, and Audrey Osborne came along from Children's Services, Children and Families, to say she's leading on this bit of work, and she was asking to set up a group to take this forward, because autism strategy is now over 10 years old. So we've agreed that, and that's going out to all the members to set up that group to take that forward. We've also got, recently there was a Scottish Government consultation on a new ND bill as well, so that might require us to undertake different things than what we do now, so that needs to be taken into account when developing strategy. Specifically to discuss ND, neurodevelopmental disorders, in adult mental health, it's increased hugely. We've taken on a senior ND nurse who has done a lot of work about looking at the figures in our service. So currently there's over 750 people waiting for assessment. We went from 2021 to 2022 having 8 referrals for an ND assessment to every month now we have 37 new referrals. So we're looking at a new nurse-led pathway in Angus, but also linking into the Tayside work as well. So we've got consistent service across Tayside, and that also involves bringing third sector in. So we've been the Mental Health and Wellbeing Community Fund to get some funding for autism initiatives in ADHD, Angus and Dundee. And our neurodevelopmental nurse is working with them to look at the pathway to ensure that there's pre-diagnostic support and post-diagnostic support. On top of this, we are putting another bid in for those 2 organisations to support the initial self-assessment, because it's taken so many sessions to get information to do an assessment, because often people can't do the self-assessment on their own. Just with the nature of the condition, it's difficult to get all those bits of information together. So that's going to go to round 4 of the Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund, and the panel this year were very supportive of that bid going in, so we're hopeful to get that. I'm currently also working on a report for EMT with all this information of where we are now in a bit of an options appraisal actually, and seeking a bit more funding for additional staff just based on the amount of referrals coming in, potential from strategic reserves. But it's maybe a bit early to be saying that. But definitely we're looking at it very closely at the moment, the increase in demand.
Thank you, Terry. That was really helpful. And I want to bring Karen Fletcher in. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just coincidental, but just as a matter of note, as lead nurse for the partnership, I also attend GIRFIC, which is Getting It Right for Every Child, to try and understand the pathways of care for children that are transitioning, for example. And as part of that, I liaise with the Child Health Commissioner for NHS Tayside, Elaine Cruikshank, and conversations today were around actually neurodevelopmental children with neurodevelopmental potential diagnosis, but also that transition of care. So that is just a today conversation that others might not yet be aware about, sitting in email boxes. So it's on our radar, and looking at that a bit further.
Thank you, Karen. And Alison?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, absolutely, Karen, it is part of that GIRFIC approach as a priority within their work. I would also emphasise the importance of having a less medical approach in terms of the traditional pathway of seeing a doctor, getting a diagnosis and being on a tablet. People with neurodevelopmental differences need the support that is tailored to them, and it involves a multidisciplinary approach. And it's not to say that having a multidisciplinary team is any less. In fact, I think it's higher quality, and it's how we develop these services. Peer support is a big part of that potentially, and we are looking at that quite creatively in order to get the right thing for people. But lots of work going on. It definitely is one of our top priorities.
Thank you. And Kirsty wants to come back in.
No, that is really helpful. I guess one of the things I'm particularly interested in as well for the relationship between people waiting for assessment or accessing services and parenting, and how we might be able to access or plug some of the gaps through, say, whole family wellbeing funding and that kind of approach. So just an opportunity to join the dots, but you know, that gap for some people, whilst they're parenting young children or multiple children in the family, can then show itself elsewhere in the system. And for me, my mind's going to like how we might join the dots on that. So helpful to hear the update. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see that happening in real time. Is the joining the dots. Lois.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm aware I've already kind of asked the question, but it was really just because the discussion has moved on to autism and neurodivergence, and I just wanted to come in and just, I guess I've been pursuing for quite some time the update of the autism strategy, but been kind of pursuing that through kind of the Council and Children's Services. But yeah, I wanted to really just to come in and question / comment, I guess, just around kind of autism and neurodivergence, you know, those cohorts, and just my concern around the fact that it sits within mental health. Not for a minute, Terry, is there anything wrong with you and your team? But just, I guess, over the years, there has been a lot of stigma attached and a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around autism, and it has often sat in the wrong place. And although people with autism can have a mental, you know, a kind of a mental health condition, disorder as well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they do. And I know just even from some of the correspondence I see in terms of caseload, it kind of does kind of strike and is quite alarming when, or the conversation can take a different turn, because you think then that person is maybe sitting with mental health because there's a mental health condition, if that makes sense. So I guess, yes, what update can you give on that, and what are the thoughts for the future for Angus, and where those kind of individuals and groups perhaps would best sit?
Thanks, Lois. Alison's indicated she wants to come in on that.
So I fully agree with you, Lois. I think that where we need to get to is that people, wherever they come into our system, there's no wrong door, and I think our mental health hubs help with that. But how can we stop having perhaps mental health hubs and move towards how do we access services in a relevant way, whether someone has a physical health problem, a mental health problem, or any other difference that means they need a particular approach. I think for me it's about taking the labelling away from mental health, physical health, and actually what does the person need, and in the community. And I'm a GP, so I would say that, so we cover everything. And that, with the way that we have our services around general practice, is huge for this, in terms of people being able to access and developing communities, locality working. I think that's the way forward from my perspective, and I think we can get that right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure as this develops, we'll all have an opportunity to contribute, you know, our own particular viewpoints and experiences on that, and the lived experience, whether as an individual or as a member of the family, a carer. I think that's going to be really important. So thank you very much for that. Any more questions or comments on the strategic planning update? No. Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion. If I can take you to the recommendations on page 55, are we happy to approve the revision to the strategic priorities, endorse a reasonable level of assurance regarding progress, and acknowledge that further reports will be presented as per the work plan. Everyone happy with that? That's marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. And if we can then move to item 7, which is the Angus Adult Protection Committee update, and it's Jill.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and I'm just going to hand straight over to John, who's got the lead in the partnership.
Thanks,
for
John.
Adult protection.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jill. So this report really seeks to provide members assurance of the work of the Adult Protection Committee in contributing to keeping vulnerable adults safe within Angus, and also the future plans for the committee in 2024 and beyond. The APC, the Adult Protection Committee, has been independently chaired by Mr Ewan West, and the IGB has recently approved the annual report for the Adult Protection Committee, which highlights all the work that's been carried out over this past year. It's really clear that adult protection work forms a significant part of the duties of the partnership. We don't do it in isolation. We work alongside police, social work, health, housing, and a number of other sectors and professions as well. And you will note within the report the table, which does highlight the growth in numbers of adult support and protection referrals received, and also where from. There's something very positive about that I think it is worth noting, which does highlight the increased awareness across sectors, and I would say actually across society, of reported concerns relating to adults at risk of harm. So that is something that is good news, and it highlights the work, I think, in part of the committee. I would say that despite the high referral numbers, the number of case conferences remains fairly static, so we're seeing a lot of that early preventative work being carried out around our protection agenda too, which is also positive, and staff do continue to prioritise protection work within their workloads. Within the report, you'll note as well in the past few months that Scottish Government are taking forward national work which links adult protection, child protection and violence against women and girls, and they are taking forward a national Protecting People strategy. So in Angus, the Chief Officers Group has agreed to also implement this approach going forward, and to enable this, they have recruited an independent chair, and that chair is Mr Ewan West, who's been appointed in the past few months. So you'll note in the report that the Adult Protection Committee, Child Protection Committee and the Violence Against Women and Girls Committee in Angus are now disbanded, with a new Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee being stood up, so that will encompass the 3 committees, and there will be 5 delivery groups to support the work of this new committee. It will continue to report to the Chief Officer Group as before. So it is hoped that this new structure will aid transitions, taking on board the points that Kirsty raised earlier about joining the dots. So having those 3 important aspects of work together, it's hoped that we will see improved transitions, as well as efficiencies in respect of the number of meetings for staff, also greater connections across the workforce to help keep vulnerable people safe. So it is more of a whole family approach. So you'll note the 2 recommendations contained within the report, and I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And before I move on, I want to apologise to Terry and Gail. I had fully intended to say thank you for your contributions before we moved on to the next paper, and my mistake was it was a mental note, not a written down note. So thank you for that. Any questions for John, please, on his paper? Kirsty.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. It's really helpful to see this here. I had a question about the referral by source and what looks like a fairly significant year-on-year increase of referrals coming from acute health services. And I wondered if we could link that to any particular activity, awareness raising, training, or if there's any kind of causal effect of anything we've done, or it's a fluke in the data. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. You may well have answered your own question there. Actually, I think it is a combination of all of the above. There is much more recognition of the need for staff across all aspects within health around the work of adult protection. I think it would be fair to say that child protection has been there's been more awareness of that over the years. Adult protection has taken some time to embed itself within practice across all sectors. So a combination of training, awareness raising, the work of Grace Gilling's team as well, particularly around the embedding of adult support and protection procedures for health, and working really closely alongside colleagues within social work and, of course, the partnership. So I think it does highlight the good work of this awareness raising and the fact that staff are picking up areas of concern and reporting appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've got Peter in the room, Lois online, and was there a hand down? No, okay. Two to crack on with.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a comment, I suppose, before a question. The increase in referrals from a wide range of sources, John, demonstrates a growing awareness and proactive stance, so that's really good. I suppose the question, you've probably answered it to an extent, but it says, how will the new Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee ensure that the distinct areas, adult protection, child protection and VAWG, maintain their individual focus and effectiveness? Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Good question. So there is still a statutory requirement to undertake the work, and which did previously empower the Adult Protection Committee. That those same statutory powers will exist as far as Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee. Really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it, in terms of the work that goes on there. So there absolutely will still need to be the same level of scrutiny in terms of these three individual aspects. The fact that this has been taken forward as a national approach highlights the Scottish Government's oversight of these three areas and the recognition actually of the need to ensure that there is much greater link up between the three areas. There can be a real danger that not having those links, we've got pieces of work going on in silos that could potentially increase risk as well. So there are other partnerships that have taken forward this approach before us, and myself and Ewan West and another colleague attended a session in Edinburgh at COSLA a few months back to hear of some of the good practice that was coming from this new approach. So I think the hope would be certainly when we report back around the work of the Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee, you should hopefully see some of those strong linkages and ultimately good, better outcomes as well for vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, probably similar. I'd kind of raised concern before in committee, actually, with Mr West, I think in one of the council committee meetings around the number of groups and subgroups, and I'm really just questioning how much kind of time and resource that must take up and take away from frontline business and operations in terms of keeping people safe. And I just wondered whether is there a link to the previous discussion we had in terms of I guess the pressures and frontline staff being able to attend those kind of reviews and support meetings. Is there a hope that with this committee, with the reduction in the number of groups and subgroups, that will free up a bit more capacity to be able to perhaps, for social workers and other staff to be able to attend those type of meetings? And my kind of second part is around a recent motion I brought to council, which was raising awareness of the challenges that people face who are not online. And I got a renewed commitment from the council to ensure that we promote better use of our access offices and places and spaces. And I guess my link with this report is just how important it is that we ensure that people can report concerns who are not online. And I just wondered if you'd mentioned their kind of training opportunities that were scheduled, and I just wondered if maybe there could be a bit of a reach out and a link with our access office spaces.
Thanks, Lois. And before I ask John to answer that, I was going to ask about has there been any change to the reporting structure? Because quite a few of us end up seeing the reports quite a number of times, and that ties up officer time too. So I'm just wondering if there's been any consolidation there as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Speed, and thank you, Chair. So I'll deal with the 3 points individually. So absolutely, as far as efficiency goes, yes, it's hoped that this will reduce the number. Well, it will reduce the number of meetings. I think, if I remember right, there was one officer attending 14 meetings spread across the 3 committee areas, which is a huge amount of work, a huge amount of time taken, and it is going to reduce that massively for that one individual, but certainly for a number of other individuals too. So yes, it will be much more efficient and allow staff to focus on the important work that they're doing. In terms of the challenges associated with accessing referrals. Yeah, we do have a number of routes in, and I think what the table hopefully highlights as well is that even those, including friends and neighbours, members of the public, banks, building societies, etc., have been able to make appropriate referrals when they've believed that there could be an adult at risk of harm. So it does highlight the broad spectrum of opportunities for folk to make referrals. But I do take on board your point, so happy to take that forward in terms of looking at future training to ensure that it does link into the access office space. Councillor Speed, happy to touch base off table in respect of that if there's anything that we can specifically look at. Joe, in terms of your question around the changings in reporting structure, I'll need to come back to you on that one. I think Ewan will have a view. Obviously, it does maintain, Chief Officer Group maintains oversight of the work of the Protecting People Angus Strategic Committee in the same way that it did for the Adult Protection Committee. I think your point's more around the reports coming to various committees, so that is something that it did feel we were bringing the same report for several weeks in a row, so I absolutely take on board your point. So I'm happy to pick that up with Ewan West as chair and see if we can look at that.
Yeah, I mean, when people get multiple opportunities to question it and scrutinise it, you know, you're then kind of making up random questions because you've already covered your most important ones, and it actually does add work, particularly to the chair. And some key officers. So we're all about trying to be sensible, I think. So thank you very much for that. And David, and then Hayley. Is that the right order? Sorry, David, then Hayley.
Thank you, Chair. I was noting with the significant number of referrals for people who are in care home settings of one form or another, and making the connection to the earlier information we received about the establishment of the care home support team. And my question really is whether that's a theme that's already been picked up by this new team to provide consistent support, which was expressed in the narrative of the earlier report.
Thank you. Hand back to John.
Thank you, David. Apologies. Thank you, David, for the question. Yes, the care home support team has been really important in Farras taking forward those pieces of work. Care homes do have a duty to report any adult protection concerns, not only appropriately through the local channels, but also to the Care Inspectorate as part of their registration requirements. So there is the expectation that they do that. Whenever they don't do that and concerns come to light, that's often part of sometimes a large-scale investigation. Certainly part of ongoing scrutiny or support that the care home team would offer. And there's been several examples where we've been able to respond quickly to provide adult protection training to staff within care homes, just to provide that additional skill set, particularly if there's a number of new starts or particularly if there's a number of agency staff, which unfortunately happens quite consistently across the care home sector. So, yep, in answer to your question, the team is quite pivotal in that work, but it's again work that we would expect to be happening anyway as part of the registration requirements.
Sorry. Thanks for that. It wasn't about the referral process, it was reflecting the earlier narrative where there was, quote, some frustration about access to support to develop practice and whether that was being picked up by the support team. Thanks.
I think Nikki's wanting to come in on that. Are you, Nikki?
Well, I hope it covers what David is asking. So there has been a lot of confusion for care homes in regards to what is reported under adult support and protection. And so what the care home team has explained through, you know, coming along to the care home forum, and also as John alluded to there, providing some training, is to set clearer guidance. So if somebody had an unwitnessed fall, for example, in a care home, the manager wouldn't necessarily see that as reportable as adult support and protection. So there's been a lot of, I suppose, conflict is probably a fair way to put it in terms of what they report, what they don't report. And it's just about that clarity. And I think there obviously has been a much higher level of adult support and protection notifications being raised. But it's just to keep the care home team informed of what's going on, and as John said, so that then they can offer that support at an early stage. I hope that maybe helps, David. I'm not sure. Thank you.
David is nodding vigorously, so thank you very much for that contribution, Nikki. And if I can pass over to Hayley.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just swinging back to Councillor Speed's comments earlier around the new structure and how people sometimes don't have access to online. And I think something that's worth noting to IGB is that myself, as the TSI Third Sector Rep, is now a member of the Protecting People Committee, and that's quite a new addition to this committee. Before, there was always Third Sector Specialist Agencies sit on around these tables when there were the 3 committees. However, I think having the TSI there will help support community engagement and community consultation. So again, that gives another route which might satisfy some of Councillor Speed's earlier questions around people not having access to online, because that's our specific role there at that group.
Thank you, Hayley. Any more questions on that report? Okay, if I can take us to the recommendations, we've scrutinised and discussed, so I think we've covered off one. And we are now aware that this is the last Adult Protection Committee update report, and that we'll all be looking at the umbrella report in future, which is great. So thank you very much for bringing that, John. And if we can now move on to the annual performance report, please, and that's Sandy.
Yep. Thanks, Chair. I will just make again a few introductory comments, and hopefully people have had a chance to read it. We're happy to take any questions, and in particularly through Sally and myself will try and respond to those questions. So in terms of kind of introductory comments, this is our annual performance report to this committee. We did a mid-year report in February. This report is in a dashboard style, so it's kind of like a simplified version because, as you may recall from previous reports and is noted in these papers, we will do our formal annual public performance report in July. Ideally, they would be one and the same document, but the timing of our committees doesn't really lend itself to picking up the available information from other sources in time to produce our annual public performance report. So that's noted in here. What we also expect to do in future reports is to gradually integrate the local performance indicators that we discussed at the April meeting. There was a list of them that are again included in the papers, so they will appear in future reports. Equally, given that we've just agreed earlier on this afternoon to restructure some of the strategic commissioning plan priorities, that will gradually change the way we structure some of our performance reporting. But aside from those kind of introductory comments, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions. And between me and Sally, or Sally and I, we will. I do listen to my mum sometimes. We'll try and answer any questions.
I am the grammar police, but mostly written, so don't worry, you're fine. Any questions? Oh, right, flurry of hands. Sam first, and then Karen, and I'll look out for online as well.
Thanks, Chair. The percentage of people with a positive experience at GP practice, that looks alarming. But from my experience in the past, the numbers are generally very low. So it doesn't take much to skew that to make it look as if it's a poor result. Is that? Do you know what the numbers who responded to that question were, Sandy?
The numbers are small, Sam, and I think at the bottom of page 78 in section 5, the third paragraph, there's just reference there, the latest health and care experience survey from January, 7,000 forms issued to Angus residents, 2,000 responses. Of those responses, the number of questions received relatively small response rates. Now, I don't know a response rate for that particular question, but your general point, yes, we recognise that. I don't know if either Sally or Alison want to come in on that point.
Sally, please do. What's that, Alison? Sorry, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the low response for the GP care, I'm quite open to this being a true reflection, to be honest, and I say that as a GP, and I think we should be quite open around the that indicator, and it kind of reflects where we're at with the risk around the sustainability of primary care and the experience that people are receiving, and that would be the general public who responded, and it might have been a low proportion, but there are a proportion of people who are not getting access to a GP appointment when they request it. I think in Angus we do have high quality general practice around many aspects of our care. We can see that in the indicators which would suggest that we're supporting people with frailty to avoid admissions and to ensure that we're looking after people at home at the end of life. So perhaps we are prioritising that aspect of care, things that perhaps lend themselves to the expert medical generalist role that GPs fulfil. But I think it's fair to say that access to GP appointments is a struggle in some areas in the traditional way that people might wish to access a GP, and that work's required.
You could argue there's 2 points there, isn't it? There's getting access, and then there's the actual care they get. And so reading that question, you could take it either way, couldn't you, as to whether when they get in, they're probably happy, but there may be that some of them struggle to get the appointment. Yeah?
Yes, and when you break down the wider questions around general practice in the health and care experience, you can see a variety of indicators that support access and quality, and access to the wider range of multidisciplinary team members. I think the work that we are doing around the sustainability survey that you're familiar with, because you did come to the Learn About Risk lunch sessions, which was excellent to see you there. So brownie points for that. And absolutely, we discussed there around how we use that survey to inform what we need to do and where we need to build our response around primary care. Primary Care Sustainability Steering Group is actually becoming the group around primary care in general, because it's all aspects of primary care that we need to be looking at here. And I'm quite open to that being a true reflection of how we're being perceived at the moment. I think there's a lot more behind that, and it's definitely a priority for us.
Thank you, and Sam's happy with that. Karen, are you coming in?
Thank you, Chair. I just had it was a comment, and it was in relation to the annual performance dashboard, and I can see, you know, there's lots in green. I think there's a lot to be celebrated, but that's when we compare ourselves to the Scottish average. So we can see we're doing better, but there are some indicators where in 2020 we were doing really, really well, and these indicators. So I would hope, just the comment, that we aren't not looking at what we think is green, because there's clearly things that we could potentially improve on. At least we're considering these care measures.
Absolutely, thanks very much. And bear in mind that COVID impact, I mean, I guess it's still happening actually, that's something that we need to take into account as well. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. And really to agree with Alison around the sort of GP access. I mean, sustainability is key, and the work on that is key. But also to highlight that I think it is misleading in terms of the sort of the read of that national indicator. It always has been, because most people read that as, you know, whether you're happy with the care you receive, as opposed to whether you can access the care in the first place. And yet, you know, the multiple sort of factors within this, when you look at the individual questions, actually the bulk of it is around access. And I've always found it fairly interesting when looking at those that even the subset of people who have not accessed their GP are then unhappy with the access. So they didn't want to see a GP, but then were unhappy with their ability to see a GP, which didn't really sort of sit logically with me. So I think it is important to look at that, and the sustainability survey, our other sort of patient experience surveys the practices do, both internally and wider, I think give us that feedback in terms of the actual care that we're providing, and all of the other quality measures that we measure in general practice, I think are hopefully giving us some assurance about the quality of care that's being delivered, and also pointing out the areas where we could improve, and that's really important, and the areas that we can collaborate to improve, which is again another level up in importance. I just wonder whether and I think Karen was alluding to this as well, in terms of some of these changes in percentage achievement. Because there are some, if I look at NI7, NI9, you've got almost a 25% change in that. So one of them has remained green because we're still sitting there above the Scotland average. One of them has moved away from green. But we almost need to have a look at this and consider whether is it useful having a chart or a graphic that shows percentage change. And if there's a percentage change of more than X amount, then that's one that we should be focusing on, because then we can perhaps step in just in the line of looking at prevention and proactive care, actually prevention and proactivity in terms of these, because they may be green, but actually next year they may have slipped out of green, but we might be able to change that by acting now. Yep.
Sandy and then Sally. Sally, were you indicating to come? No, okay. And then Peter. And then Lewis.
Chair, I was just going to respond to a couple of comments. I was going to make one additional comment as well, but just in terms of responses, we've had a couple of comments there about, I suppose, almost the data that is being collected in these national indicators, particularly regarding that national indicator number 6. And I think if this, if the board was prepared to support it or lend us your support, you don't need to put this in a minute, but even just by a series of nods of heads, I think we could write to, contact the people, kind of maintaining and updating, refreshing these national indicators, and just say, when it comes to people really trying to interpret them, people in governance roles, such as this forum, the way the national indicators are sometimes structured really just doesn't need a wee bit of a refresh. This is a good example. There are one or two others as well. So if people just nod their heads, we'll do that and just say collectively, that's where we are. Because I think that does help to be able to bring the kind of the collective views of groups such as this and put them into national forums. The second point, Andrew, you were just making there was about the way we've depicted the changes. And we have, as the board will recognise, we are showing our performance in terms of the red, amber, green as a relative performance to the Scottish position. And one of the reasons we've kind of done that is we know that in a scenario where the overall health and social care system is challenged, or there's workforce challenges that are not unique to us, that are endemic throughout a lot of the Scottish health and social care system, for us to compare our performance in terms of how well are we doing, you almost have to say sometimes, how well are you doing compared with others? So there's a bit of that about how we've chosen to do this. But none of that is the same as, perhaps we could have done better. This one has gone down by 25, but we're still better than somebody else or whatever. So we'll reflect on that when we bring together the annual performance report. We try and keep things simple. Of course, that's the other thing. You can compare things in many different ways. But when we try and bring the report together, the annual public performance report, which is a bit longer for publication in July, we'll keep the comments about your percentage changes and how we depict reporting in mind. And while I mention the production of the annual performance report, it was remiss of me not to thank Paul Feltham, our information manager, for the production of this report. And there's a lot of work that has to come together in a relatively short period of time, and also in terms of producing the annual report, another lot of work that has to get crammed into a short period of time. So thanks to him. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, and thanks for mentioning Paul there. And if those of us who were here last year might remember the discussion that we had around the timing of that final annual report. It will come out to us by email once it's complete, and that was a way of avoiding having an additional IGB meeting, for which our committee clerks were eternally grateful. I think it's fair to say. So, Peter, you next, and then Lewis.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is an excellent report. I think it's a nice, easy read, and I think the improvements are notable, and the performance stats are really commendable. So congratulations to the team. I suppose we've fleshed out the GP part, but I suppose I was really keen to learn a bit more and understand what additional measures can be taken or are being undertaken to address the other indicator that's below the national average, the readmission to hospital within 28 days. Thanks.
Chair. I'll go first. I think other people will have views on this one as well. And I think this is a statistic, I don't know if we've actually said it in the narrative, but I think this is a statistic where we are, sometimes a bit unsure about what that statistic truly indicates in terms of, is it good or is it bad? If we, as a whole system in Angus, are looking after systematically more people at home, with a higher threshold of care at home, we are likely to have more admissions and more readmissions, probably, statistically. And we don't know if that just nudges these numbers in a certain way. So this is one of the stats that sometimes I think perhaps could be slightly refined or looked at in a different way. However, there will be people who can comment on this probably a wee bit better than I, and I think we've probably got 2 or 3 hands up.
Alison, and then Chris.
So we have had a high level of readmissions for some time. This isn't a new thing in Angus, and previously when we looked at it, it was a case that we believe that we are looking after more of our vulnerable people at home, and because we do that, they get readmitted. So we have high performance in terms of people living and dying at home in the last 6 months of life, and that's been going on for some time. But we do notice also some other patterns developing, because we have got some high emergency admission rates, higher than previously. We used to perform well on that, and we've got low bed days, so are we looking after more vulnerable people? But we do have a concern emerging through our adverse events monitoring around discharges from hospital, and the hospitals are aware of this, and Karen maybe wants to say more around our concerns about the discharge process, and that we've got a working group to address that. So we are very much looking into these issues. Karen, I don't know whether you would wish to say.
Probably just to add, it's hot off the press as well, but we have a group along with Eunice and John and Cindy within our Medicine for the Elderly Services and Psychiatry of Old Age, looking at discharge and whether there's more we could do in terms of supporting discharge to make sure that people are more supported at home, so that readmissions can hopefully come down. But there's obviously quite a complex reason why people sometimes are readmitted.
Thanks, Karen. You got to jump there, Chris. Sorry.
Thanks. From the acute side, I wonder if some of this is also a marker of success of how successful we've been with the discharge without delay stuff. We actually don't keep people in hospital very long, and we've managed to get them home. And if you get people home quicker, they're more likely, probably, to return to hospital if they're not stuck within the 4 walls of Ninewells. So I think it's not necessarily a complete negative.
And I guess there's a thing in there as well about, is it related to the previous admission or not? It could be a new reason. Yeah, thanks. Peter.
Yeah, thanks. Just to come back, so similar to your point there, I was just wondering if there was a correlation between we have a significant number of unmet need hours for care at home, so I just wondered if there's a strong correlation there. Thanks.
John's come in and think that they've had an arm wrestle over at the corner.
I don't often win those. Yeah, I think it has to be considered. I think there's truth contained within all the comments made so far. I think it's really difficult. In some senses, it's quite a blunt instrument to try and understand what's going on. I think we have to acknowledge that in some areas there is a lack of provision, which makes it difficult to discharge well and to plan those. I think what this doesn't tell us, though, is, was it related to the same event that saw them within hospital in the first place? What does it actually tell us? I'm not wholly sure, because I think this is very similar data that went through the local government benchmarking framework as well, and there were similar questions that were somewhat difficult to answer. So it would be helpful to dig into this a little bit more going forward.
And actually, I'm also aware that there's a really high percentage of hospital admissions and care for older people around the actual harm that medications are doing, that is being covered in a work stream around prescribing at the moment. So, I know Jill's wanting to come in, but you dive in on that, Chris.
It's 43% of all our frail elderly admissions are due to the medications that people are taking. So it's a massive work stream that really needs some input.
There you go.
Thank you. Apologies, Lois, for jumping in. I just thought it would be helpful just for members to just acknowledge when we bring back the strategic planning updates, those indicators along with some of our local indicators will be part of that report, so we'll be able to get into a bit more detail and a bit more discussion around what we're actually doing, the impact of the actions, what balancing measures we're actually looking at as well. So hopefully as we kind of establish that way of reporting, then that will continue a bit more of a detailed discussion for each of the priority areas going forward.
Thank you. Lois, it's over to you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I guess something that kind of struck me when I was reading through the report, I mean, it's good to see progress is being made, but I guess just when we compare against the Scottish national average, it can appear that we're doing okay. I guess we have to just kind of be mindful that the national average is actually in decline, and so the bar is lower when we look at comparing and contrasting as to how we're doing. And I guess it was more really just a comment than anything, Chair, just around we really have to be mindful of that the actual national average is lowering.
Thanks, Lois. And I think the point that Jill's just made around seeing the bigger picture would be really helpful. And I do think that we are aware of that, but thanks for highlighting it. And Andrew.
It's just a comment on item 5 of the report, local indicators, which we approved last meeting, but now it doesn't reflect the decision we made early on to reduce the number of priorities. So that'll have to be reworked. Will we get an update of that soon?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the last paragraph on that page, Andrew, the last sentence of that says indicators may be reordered to reflect any changes agreed elsewhere regarding the strategic commissioning plan. We didn't know if the report today earlier on would be approved. We obviously, hoped it would be, but we couldn't change this in advance of that being signed off. Thanks.
So yeah, just a processy thing, Andrew, not making assumptions and preempting stroppy board members. Okay. Thank you. Any more questions on this paper? No. Okay. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing the next refresh of it. I'm just trying to find the page again. For the recommendations, it's page 78. So I think we've covered all that off and can approve those recommendations. So thank you very much for that. And that's us moving on to item 8, which is the updated annual work plan.
Thank you, Chair. So this just follows on from what I was saying at the start in relation to the action log and keeping track of papers to come back to a future IJB rather than having them as outstanding actions on the action log. So the work plan has been updated to reflect that. Just to note one change from when the report was initially submitted. So we were due to have the Mental Health and Learning Disability Regional Improvement Programme to IJB this month. There's been a lot of discussion ongoing around that, and given the level of work and detail that is included, ourselves and Dundee felt it would be helpful to have a development session in advance of the papers coming to allow IJB members to receive a presentation, have the time and scope for detailed questions and updates to be provided, hence the change around the reporting schedule for the Regional Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Programme.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions on the work plan? And I hope you understand the reason for holding fire a little bit on the mental health update. I think it's really worth doing that much more in depth. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands at all. So thank you for that. And moving to the recommendations, we've been asked to approve the work plan and reporting schedule, and acknowledge that the annual work plan reporting schedule will be presented at each IGB as a standing item, so we can keep on top of that. So thank you very much. And the very final item is the date of the next meeting, which is August the 28th at 2 o'clock. Probably expect that to be a longer meeting that day. I think that agenda is going to be quite full, and it will also be the final IGB meeting for Peter Davidson, who will be moving on to exciting pastures new, and so very much hope that you can make that in person, Peter. And in the meantime, enjoy the summer recess, those of us who get one, and take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, if you could stop the live stream, please.
Aye.